Brad was born on November 17th, 1971. It is believed he was born in Colorado, though the research wasn't clear. His parents divorced when Brad was a child, and he was raised mainly by his mother, whom he lived with until she passed away. When his mom died, Brad moved between his grandmother's and aunt's homes because he refused to live with his father. Brad's mom's death was understandably difficult for him, and Brad struggled greatly after she passed. Shortly after she died, Brad started playing guitar and began to idolize Stevie Ray Vaughan. He graduated high school in either 1990 or 1991. Again, full disclosure that research was not clear. And he moved to Texas, living with his father and stepmom. When he lived with his dad and stepmom, they led a pretty typical life, enjoying their time doing activities like fishing and camping. In fact, except for his mother's death, Brad's life was pretty average, without any significant incidents. Then, in 1992, Brad enlisted in the Army. He was 20 years old, working odd jobs, and didn't seem to have much direction, so the Army seemed like a good fit. He was never deployed overseas during the years he was enlisted. During his service, Brad held a couple of different jobs, including a missile system repairman and a psychological operations specialist. He started basic training at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, and by 1995 he was transferred to Fort Bragg in Pope Airfield, North Carolina, when he joined the Psychological Operation Corps. To become a member of that corps, Brad was required to pass arduous testing modules, which he apparently did. Brad's greatest struggle, though, seemed to be his drinking issues. He started drinking heavily in his early teen years, and it only escalated as he aged. During his enlistment, Brad arrived for duty drunk, and was subsequently demoted from sergeant to specialist. During this period, he also went AWOL, or absent without leave, which was another aggravating factor in his demotion. In 1998, Brad was discharged from the Army after he arrived for duty drunk again. It is unclear whether the discharge was honorable or dishonorable. However, it was noted that the dismissal was enforced after Brad refused to participate in alcohol counseling. It was also cited that Brad displayed patterns of misconduct and was ruled ineligible to re-enlist in the armed forces. However, his time in the Army wasn't all negative. Brad received several accolades during his time, including the Parachutist Badge, the Army Commendation Medal, and the Army Good Conduct Medal on 2 separate occasions. Military peers described Brad as extremely sensitive and shy, to the point of becoming completely antisocial. He never returned home during breaks or holidays. It was alleged that Brad attempted suicide in 1997 after a breakup, and he had difficulties maintaining meaningful relationships.
I don't know if the military was good for him. I don't know. My heart's broken for the people that were killed and their families. I can't imagine what would have gone through his mind for him to do something like this.
Most disturbingly, during his time stationed at Fort Bragg, Brad's interest in white supremacy began to flourish. He was exposed to Aryan propaganda and developed a strong interest in a heavy metal type of music that was grossly described as white power music. Research isn't clear on how or where these unsettling ideas became introduced to Brad, but it seems that his interests only intensified after his discharge from the Army. After being let go, he moved back to Colorado and in with a new girlfriend. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't last long, and before long, Brad was single again. His brushes with the law were not frequent. A warrant was issued for Brad's arrest in October of 1997 for writing a bad check. He was charged with drunk driving in Colorado in 1999. However, he never completed his sentence, and it is unclear whether a warrant or any other trouble arose from this. In 2000, Brad abruptly decided to sell everything he owned except for his motorcycle and anything he could cram into a backpack. He traveled across the country, stopping along the way to check in and visit friends. Brad randomly attended shows and music festivals along the way too, and it seemed like, though he had no roots, he was freer than he'd ever been, and by all accounts, it seemed like a good time for Brad. He enjoyed a lifestyle that was somewhat nomadic. Brad became thoroughly involved in the music scene, even saying during an interview with a record label that he attended Hammerfest in Georgia and then went to North Carolina, then Ohio, and from there West Virginia, finally crossing the entire U.S. to California. Brad arrived in California in 2001 and immediately joined the white supremacist punk rock band called Youngland as a vocalist and guitarist. After about 3 or 4 years of living out west, he up and moved again, back to North Carolina. In 2005, Brad founded the white supremacy band End Apathy. His racism and anti-Semitism were disgusting, and they only continued to grow. He purchased a home near Fort Bragg, North Carolina in 2007 and ended up refinancing in 2009. He wasn't up on his mortgage, and Wells Fargo started foreclosure proceedings the same year. From 2006 to 2010, Brad was employed by a trucking company called Bar None Transportation that was based in Iowa. His dependency on alcohol made it almost impossible to hold a job, as evidenced by his 2010 firing from this truck driving job. Brad was driving drunk in his personal vehicle in North Carolina and refused to submit to a blood alcohol test. This incident led to his termination and furthered his downfall. From the fall of 2011 to April of 2012, Brad worked various jobs as a temporary employee through Aerotech, a recruitment and staffing agency. He finally landed a more permanent job in April of 2012 at Lucas Milhaupt until the time of the shooting. About a year before the final foreclosure on his house, Brad met a woman and held a long-distance relationship with her for nearly a year before deciding to move once again, this time to Cudahy, Wisconsin. The couple broke up in June of 2012, and Brad moved out, into a house across the street. He was utterly wrecked over the breakup and deeply hurt. He was renting a room in the new home, and the homeowner described Brad as always acting normal. He likely had very little interaction with Brad, though. On the other hand, those that were close to Brad also described him as caring and intelligent. The only concern anyone had about him was his involvement with white supremacy organizations and musical outlets, which itself should have been enough to end the friendship immediately. Friends say he talked about a racial holy war that was coming, but like so many other shooters we have covered, they never thought he would cause harm to another person.
He would often mention the racial holy war that was coming, and we just looked at it as he was trying to get attention to himself, because he was always the loner type of person.
He was a loner of sorts, kind of always on his own. But somehow, all these things about Brad never sparked enough red flags for action. This statement is in no way meant to blame anyone aside from Brad for his cruel actions. It is only meant to illustrate how or why Brad could go so far with his evil plan. But make no mistake, Brad's interests in online activity were very alarming. Besides his band End Apathy, he also played in other hate bands such as Blue Eyed Devils and Definite Hate during various times of his life. These bands offered seriously repulsive lyrics, including phrases about killing Jews, black people, and nearly every other minority group imaginable. His online activity was spent mostly perusing hate forums, and on one such platform, Brad posted no less than 250 comments between March 2010 and mid-2012. His revolting commentary included encouraging others to, quote, stop hiding behind the computer or making excuses. Brad prided himself on his membership in the Hammerskins Nation, which is essentially a hate group disguised as a, quote, brotherhood, and based in Dallas, Texas. He was notorious in several different anti-hate watchdog groups online, The Southern Poverty Law Center acknowledged that they had been watching Brad and his online activity since 2000. It is unknown why no action was ever taken, and therefore, we will make no speculations on the matter.
He first really appeared on the white supremacist scene way back in 2000, when he started to play in a number of very well-known white power music bands.
On May 5, 2008, Brad was issued 5 gun permits in Cumberland County, which is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Despite obtaining the licenses, the research did not indicate whether he actually purchased any guns or weapons at that time. Brad demonstrated a tender side on occasion, at least towards his family. Only 2 weeks before the shooting, he sent his grandmother a bouquet of roses, for no reason other than he loved her. At the time of the shooting, Brad's father was living in Texas. He and Brad's stepmom had divorced in 2001, though it was amicable, and they remained in friendly contact. Overall, Brad was reported by those outside the online community as quiet and keeping to himself, but not someone they would consider dangerous. He never seemed to dress out of the ordinary, and could usually be seen carrying sound equipment or guitar cases back and forth from his SUV and home. It's difficult to know precisely when Brad's mental health deteriorated so severely that he committed this atrocious act, but one incident seems to have been the proverbial final straw, or the final push that propelled him into action. Members of an online white supremacy group discovered an older photo that suggested that Brad dated an indigenous woman. The group began to harass him about the relationship, which sent Brad into a downward spiral. Though Brad tracked down this woman and had a pleasant conversation with her only weeks before the shooting, it appears that he may have believed that committing this terroristic act would show the Hammerheads group that he was willing to take action and not just sit around waiting for a racial or holy war. What makes his actions so much more tragic is his willful ignorance in believing that the group he attacked, the Sikhs, were Muslims. Instead, he took the similarities, such as wearing turbans, robes, and beards, as evidence they were the same.
Sikhism is a disciple. I mean, at the end of the day, the definition of a Sikh is a learner and a disciple. And, we have 3 core tenets that for our daily lives. We believe in working hard and honestly, and in doing so, we're respecting our Creator. We believe in sharing our bounty with others. And then our third daily obligation is to remember God in everything we do. So even as I talk to you, I'm somehow in the back of my mind remembering God. And as a signifier of this obligation, we wear our turban as an external uniform, like a police officer has a uniform to remind them of their values. Our turban is a constant reminder to us of our obligation to stand for justice and be compassionate and loving in our interactions with people.
Such things are difficult and gut-wrenching to write or speak about. Yet these are the facts about Brad and the awful truth about who he was and his beliefs. It should never be glorified or praised. Yet it remains a part of the story, for his actions on August 5th were so violently racist, anti-Semitic, and terroristic that it unfortunately cannot be ignored. It only emphasizes the need to tell the stories of the victims and survivors and examine what went wrong to try to end such acts of mass violence and terror. Lieutenant Brian Murphy survived his numerous injuries. He is legitimately a living miracle. 2 bullets remain lodged inside his person, but that hasn't stopped or slowed him down. A retired 22-year veteran of the Oak Creek Police Department, the lieutenant currently works for the company that manufactures the bulletproof vest that saved his life. He also traveled the country, talking to other police officers that have been shot and survived. He always talks about the Sikh religion when he gives these talks. It is a beautiful way to honor the shooting victims and survivors, but more importantly, it diminishes the power of hate that ruled the day on August 5th.
How many times did you get shot? And I said 15, and she said, that's right. There was 1 bullet for every one of us who was inside.
In 2015, President Obama awarded both Lieutenant Brian Murphy and Officer Sam Lenda the Medal of Valor for